It was supposed to be just another smooth flight for Dr. Maya Hamilton, a routine trip from New York to San Francisco, aboard a first-class seat she had flown dozens of times before. But that morning, everything changed. Just minutes after boarding, two airline security officers approached her without warning, asked her to step off the plane, and offered no clear explanation. Passengers watched silently as she was escorted off, confused and humiliated. What no one realized, not the flight crew, not the security team, not even the passengers, was that Maya wasn't just any traveler. She was the billionaire founder and CEO of Artemis Innovations, the tech company behind the very software this airline used to keep its planes in the air, and its profits soaring. She wasn't just flying with them, they were flying because of her. And in less than 72 hours, Maya would pull a $4 billion deal that crippled the airline's operations, shocked Wall Street, and ignited a global conversation about race, respect, and power. This is the story of how one moment of prejudice led to a corporate downfall, and how a woman who built an empire decided she would no longer stay quiet at 30. It was a crisp, clear Monday morning at JFK International Airport, and the energy in Terminal 4 buzzed with the usual mix of business travelers, vacationers, and half-awake commuters shuffling through security lines. Among them walked Maya Hamilton, composed, elegant, and unmistakably focused. At 38, she had become one of the most powerful names in tech, known not only for founding Artemis Innovations, but for steering it into a billion-dollar juggernaut, shaping the future of aerospace and artificial intelligence. Her schedule was relentless, her mind always 10 steps ahead. But today was different. Today was important. Clad in a tailored navy pantsuit and black heels that clicked with purpose against the polished floors, Maya moved with the quiet assurance of someone who knew her worth. In her hand was a Louis Vuitton Horizon carry-on, and nestled under her arm, a leather folio holding the draft of a deal that would send shockwaves through the airline industry. She had barely slept the night before, rehearsing her pitch, reviewing tech reports, and tweaking the final line of a speech that would introduce Artemis's new AI-powered fleet management platform, a revolutionary step in aviation efficiency. As she approached the gate for Flight 7013 to San Francisco, the familiar faces of airline staff barely looked up. Maya had taken this same flight nearly a dozen times in the past 6 months. It was routine. She scanned her digital boarding pass without issue, nodded politely at the attendant, and walked down the jet bridge with the calm confidence of someone who had earned her seat at the front of the plane. Seat 2A, first-class window, her favorite. She placed her bag overhead, took out her phone to check emails, and accepted the glass of sparkling water offered by the flight attendant. She'd barely taken a sip when she noticed two uniformed airline security officers moving down the aisle. At first she thought they were headed toward another passenger. She avoided eye contact, assuming it was unrelated. "Ma'am," one of them said, stopping beside her, "we need you to step off the aircraft." Maya blinked, stunned. "I'm sorry, we need you to come with us," the second officer repeated. His voice was firm but oddly quiet, as if trying not to attract attention, though it was already too late. Heads were turning, eyes lingered. The hush of curiosity settled over the cabin. "Is there a problem with my ticket?" Maya asked, calmly but clearly unsettled. "We'll explain at the gate," one officer said. They offered no further explanation. Embarrassed but composed, Maya collected her things and followed them back up the aisle. No one spoke. No one asked questions. Even the flight attendants avoided her gaze. At the gate she was met by a gate supervisor, who didn't look up from her tablet as she said, "There's a discrepancy with your ticket, ma'am." Maya raised an eyebrow. "I have a confirmed first-class seat. Here's my digital receipt." She held out her phone, displaying the boarding pass, and email confirmation from the airline's app. The supervisor barely glanced at it, before shrugging. "It's random protocol, security flag, happens sometimes." Maya stood there, momentarily stunned. No apology, no explanation beyond vague references to a random flag. The plane's door closed behind her. Flight 7013 departed without her. As the noise of the boarding area returned to normal, Maya sat in silence, her expression unreadable. She wasn't loud, she didn't shout, she didn't threaten. She simply opened her phone, canceled her car on the other end of the flight, and began typing a message to her chief of staff. What the airline didn't realize, what the supervisor and the security team would only understand far too late, was that the woman they had just pulled off the plane didn't just use their technology, she owned the future of, and in less than 72 hours, she was about to change the entire course of their company. The black town car pulled away from the terminal, merging into the slow-moving traffic loop that wrapped around JFK. Inside, Maya Hamilton sat in silence, her phone resting in her lap, her gaze fixed on the rain-speckled window. Her reflection stared back at her, a calm, composed woman with dark, watchful eyes and a mind spinning like the high-speed processors her company designed. To the outside world, she was just another passenger, whose travel plans had been inconvenienced. But internally, Maya was calculating a response, not out of anger, but precision. Because Maya wasn't just a CEO, she was the architect behind Artemis Innovations, a company that had quietly become the nervous system of the modern aviation industry. From real-time flight optimization and fuel reduction algorithms, to predictive maintenance systems that prevented catastrophic failures, Artemis was embedded in almost every major airline's infrastructure. Its tech ran silently in the background, saving billions annually, while Maya kept the spotlight off herself and on the results. But last month had been different. She'd stepped into the limelight, reluctantly, for what was to be her company's biggest deal yet, a $4 billion strategic partnership with one of the top 5 global airlines. The same airline that had just pulled her off a plane without cost. Maya remembered the conference room clearly, polished glass walls, 10 gray suits seated across from her, and a whiteboard filled with projections. They'd called her impressive, visionary, even disruptive in the best possible way. She'd worn the same navy suit that morning, the same confidence, the same sharp intellect. None of that mattered now, because today, all they saw was a black woman in first class, who in their eyes must have been out of place. She picked up her phone and tapped her assistant's contact. When Kennedy answered, Maya didn't waste time. "Pull the Artemis contract," she said flatly. "Every last dollar." There was a pause on the line. Kennedy was one of the few people who knew exactly what that meant. "All $4 billion, she asked, her voice low. "Yes," Maya said, still watching the world pass outside the window. "Transfer priority access to Skybridge Airlines. Let them know they've got first rights to the platform, effective immediately." It wasn't just business, it was strategy. Skybridge Airlines, a fast-rising competitor, had been courting Maya for over a year. They were younger, smaller but nimble. Unlike the legacy giants, they didn't scoff at innovation or underestimate the woman behind it. In fact, their CEO, a Korean-American woman named Jae Park, had once told Maya during a lunch meeting, "People like us don't get seats at the table, we build our own table." Maya had smiled at the time. She wasn't smiling now. Her phone buzzed again. News updates, email, a message from one of the airline board members, seemingly unaware of what had just happened on Flight 7 and 13. "Looking forward to your team's final integration update this week," the message read. She didn't respond. The irony burned. They wanted her brain but dismissed her presence, trusted her code, but not her character, welcomed her signature but not her skin. Maya leaned back in her seat, finally allowing a slow breath to escape. She wasn't impulsive, and she didn't believe in revenge for the sake of revenge, but she did believe in accountability. And this, what happened on that plane, was going to have consequences that reached far beyond a missed flight, because in the aviation world, Artemis wasn't just a vendor, it was oxygen. And now, this airline was about to find out what happened when you lose the air you breathe. By Wednesday morning, the polished glass walls of the airline's executive suite were no longer reflecting confidence, they were now mirroring panic. Emails were flooding in from across departments: system failure on Route Optimizer, maintenance AI offline, back to manual protocols, international delay notices escalating, FAA has questions. The Artemis platform, once silently humming along as the backbone of the airline's operations, was now partially disengaged, and it was only the beginning. CEO Mark Tolbert stood at the center of the storm. He was a veteran of the industry, clean-cut, silver-haired, and usually composed. But now, his shirt collar was open, his tie discarded somewhere on the floor. Senior VPs flanked the room, arguing over tech dependencies, investor calls, and mounting customer complaints. Flights were being delayed, or grounded across 3 continents. The losses were already in the tens of millions. "Get Artemis back online," Tolbert barked into a call with his CIO. "I've already tried. Access revoked. All credentials purged." "They've pulled everything, Mark," the voice replied. "We didn't just lose a vendor, we lost the nerve center of our entire digital infrastructure." Tolbert didn't respond. He was already dialing another number, Maya Hamilton's direct line. It rang twice. "Maya, it's Mark," he began, forcing calm into his voice. "Listen, this has to be a misunderstanding." On the other end of the line, Maya's tone was even and deliberate. "No misunderstanding, Mark. Your airline publicly humiliated me on a flight you operate, in a seat I paid for, surrounded by systems my company built. Look, I don't know what happened on that flight," he said quickly. "There must have been some internal error, a miscommunication with security." "No, Mark," Maya interrupted. It was a very clear communication. Your team saw a black woman in first class and assumed I didn't belong there. You called it protocol. I call it profiling. You benefited from my technology but couldn't recognize the person behind it. And now, you're dealing with the results of that mindset. There was a long silence. The weight of her words cut through the corporate noise, better than any press release ever could. But Maya, this is going to cost both of us. We can fix this. Let's talk terms. There are no terms, she said. There are consequences. She ended the call. By noon, the media had caught wind of the story. An anonymous tip had leaked details of the incident, and by the time lunch hour hit the East Coast, Twitter was ablaze with outrage. Screenshots of Maya's resume, keynote speeches, and Forbes cover photos circulated rapidly. Clips of her past interviews about representation in tech were clipped and reposted. Influencers, activists, and public figures began weighing in. The hashtag June, Fly with Respect was trending in over 20 news outlets ran the headline, CEO pulled from first-class seat, pulls $4 billion in funding in response. TV anchors asked the question aloud, what happens when a corporation forgets who holds the real power? Meanwhile, investors began offloading airline shares. A Bloomberg analyst called it a digital decapitation. Artemis had powered nearly 70% of the airline's real-time operations. Rebuilding that tech or replacing it would take months, maybe longer. Stockholders weren't willing to wait. And as the airline's public relations team scrambled to draft a statement, one glaring truth began to set in among the board. They hadn't just made a PR mistake. They had picked a fight with the one woman they couldn't afford to ignore. By Friday morning, all eyes were on San Francisco. The skyline buzzed with reporters, photographers, and media vans parked outside the Artemis Innovations headquarters, a sleek, glass-paneled tower that had become a symbol of power, precision, and quiet revolution in Silicon Valley. Inside the building's state-of-the-art press room, every seat was filled. Journalists from CNN, CNBC, and international outlets, like the BBC and Al Jazeera, waited with cameras trained on the podium. No one knew exactly what Maya Hamilton was going to say, but after the chaos of the past week, the world was listening. The room fell silent as Maya stepped up to the podium. She wore a charcoal gray blazer with a subtle gold pin, Artemis's logo, a stylized compass needle, resting over her heart. Her expression was calm, her voice measured. She didn't need to raise her tone to command attention. She began with no script. Many of you have heard about the incident earlier this week, she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. But let me be clear, this isn't just about me missing a flight. This is about a pattern. It's about how often women, especially black women, are assumed to be in the wrong place, even when we've earned the right to be there. We walk into boardrooms, sit at the head of the table, build empires, write the code that keeps planes in the sky, and still, we get pulled off them. There was a pause as cameras clicked furiously. Her words echoed through the room, powerful and deliberate. But I didn't come here today to complain, she continued. I came here to build. That's when the screen behind her flickered to life. It displayed the logo of Skybridge Airlines, the rising star in the aviation world, that had been quietly growing in the shadows of the larger carrier. The words underneath read, Strategic Partnership, Artemis X Skybridge, $4 billion investment in the future of flight. Gasps swept across the room. I'm proud to announce that Artemis Innovations is partnering with Skybridge Airlines, Maya said. Together, we will be launching a next-generation fleet, powered entirely by Artemis AI, real-time performance optimization, predictive maintenance, sustainable fuel routing, all integrated by design. But that's not all. She tapped a remote. The screen changed to display a sleek, futuristic interface, labeled Clara, Customer Loyalty and Respect Assistant, a new AI platform created by Artemis to train and assist frontline airline staff, with real-time bias detection, respectful engagement protocols, and passenger protection alert. This platform, called Clara, was developed in response to what happened to me. It will ensure that no passenger is ever profiled, silenced, or humiliated the way I was. Skybridge has committed to implementing it across their global operations. Reporters were stunned. The story had turned from scandal to transformation, and then came the twist. Some of you may know, Maya said, a small smile forming, that Skybridge offered me a seat on their board 2 years ago. I declined at the time. I didn't think I needed. She looked out across the sea of flashing bulbs and raised hands. But after this week, I've realized that representation doesn't just belong in innovation, it belongs in governance. So I've accepted that seat, not just for me, but for every brilliant, overlooked mind still waiting to be seen. Thunderous applause broke out across the room. Social media lit up in real time, with hashtags like June, Skybridge Rising, Tech with Teeth, and built by Maya climbing the chart. Outside, protesters who had gathered to support Maya throughout the week began celebrating. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a masterclass in turning adversity into opportunity. And inside the crumbling tower of her former airline partner, stunned silence reigned. 3 months later, the world looked very different. At 37,000 feet, cruising smoothly above the Rockies, Dr. Maya Hamilton sat once again in seat 2. But this time, the flight wasn't tense or uncertain. It was a quiet victory. The aircraft, a newly unveiled AI-optimized Dreamliner, shimmered with sleek design and silent confidence. It belonged to Skybridge Airlines now, powered entirely by Artemis technology, and outfitted with Clara, the groundbreaking customer service AI Maya had developed in response to her own ordeal. The flight attendants greeted her by name the moment she boarded, not out of obligation, but out of genuine recognition for who she was, and what she represented. As she sipped herbal tea, she glanced across the aisle, and noticed a young black girl sitting with her mother. The girl looked to be around 8 or 9, wearing oversized pink headphones and clinging to a tablet. She kept sneaking curious glances at Maya, her eyes wide. Eventually, the girl tugged at her mother's sleeve, and whispered something. The mother smiled and nodded, encouraging her. A moment later, the girl turned and waved shyly. Maya smiled warmly, and leaned over. "You can build anything, you know," she said gently, "even the sky." The girl beamed. It was a simple moment, but Maya understood its weight. Representation wasn't about vanity, it was about visibility. For that little girl, seeing someone who looked like her at the front of the plane, not just on the plane, but shaping the industry itself, could rewrite the trajectory of her dreams. Outside the window, clouds stretched like soft mountains, and below them, an old era was quietly fading. The airline that had once dismissed Maya's presence on Flight 713 was in freefall. Stock prices had plummeted after Artemis pulled out. Customers boycotted in droves. Internal investigations revealed systemic issues in both staffing and training, sparking public outrage. The CEO, Mark Tulbert, was ousted by the board. Lawsuits followed. Within weeks, the airline's legacy status had eroded, and analysts called it a cautionary tale in corporate arrogance. In contrast, Skybridge was soaring. Their collaboration with Artemis had put them on the map as the most innovative and inclusive airline in the sky. They had expanded their fleet, doubled their customer satisfaction scores, and become a darling of both tech and travel publications. The Clara platform, once created in response to Maya's mistreatment, had become a new gold standard in human-centered AI. More importantly, Maya's story was being studied in business schools, boardrooms, and diversity training programs worldwide. Case studies dissected the decisions that led to one airline's collapse and another's rise. TED Talks were delivered, panels were held. Her name had become synonymous with the kind of leadership that didn't just demand change, it engineered it. But Maya didn't care about the spotlight. What mattered to her wasn't just personal redemption, it was the quiet structural shift, now taking root, a cultural recalibration, a lesson etched in both profit margins and principles. As the plane began its descent into Seattle, the cabin lights dimmed. Maya closed her laptop, having just finished reviewing a proposal for Artemis's next phase, sustainable, AI-driven aviation design. The future was calling, and she was already boarding the next idea. Before landing, the captain came on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're proud to welcome Dr. Maya Hamilton on board today. Her vision helped make this aircraft a reality." A soft ripple of applause moved through the cabin. Maya looked out the window one last time. The sky used to be the limit, now it was just the beginning. What happened to Dr. Maya Hamilton wasn't just about a missed flight. It wasn't just about a boarding pass, a seat in first class, or the vague excuse of a random security protocol. It was about something much deeper, something that too many people experience, but too few are in a position to confront head-on. Maya's story peeled back the polished veneer of corporate courtesy and exposed what often lies beneath: systemic bias, subtle assumptions, and the quiet, daily indignities that powerful people of color, especially women, still face, no matter how far they've climbed. Maya wasn't profiled because she was unknown. She was profiled because someone saw her and couldn't reconcile her presence with their expectations. They saw a black woman in a luxury seat and assumed mistake instead of merit. And that is the dangerous power of unconscious bias. It doesn't ask questions, it just acts, often with the weight of entire institutions behind it. But what the world saw in the days that followed wasn't just Maya's pain. They witnessed her response. Maya didn't react with rage. She didn't demand attention or cry for sympathy. Instead, she did what great leaders do. She channeled adversity into action. She made decisions with clarity, not emotion. She didn't just pull a contract.
She rerouted the future. She didn't just expose a problem, she engineered a solution that others could adopt, replicate, and learn from. And in doing so, she flipped the script entirely. Maya Hamilton reminded the world that respect is not a courtesy to be handed out by gatekeepers. It is a basic human right, and when it's denied to the wrong person, someone with vision, power, and integrity, the fallout doesn't just affect feelings, it shakes entire industries. Her decision to pull a $4 billion contract wasn't an act of vengeance, it was a rebalance. It was a reminder that real power doesn't come from holding titles or running companies, it comes from knowing when to walk away from the table and build a better one. Her actions forced leaders to look inward and ask hard questions. Who are we really designing our systems for? Who's being left out, or worse, pushed out? And when we say diversity, do we mean it, or is it just another line in the brochure? Maya's press conference didn't just launch a partnership, it launched a movement. Her words echoed in boardrooms, in conference halls, not because they were flashy, but because they were honest. They came from someone who had nothing left to prove but everything left to build. And perhaps the most powerful moment of all wasn't the corporate collapse, or the triumphant press release. It was a simple smile, shared with a young black girl aboard a plane, Maya herself helped bring into reality. In that moment, legacy was passed on. In that brief exchange, the arc of what's possible bent a little wider. Maya's story will be studied, yes, in business schools, on leadership panels, in DEI training programs, but more than that, it will be remembered by the people who saw themselves in her, who needed the reminder that they weren't imagining the barriers, and that those barriers can be broken with grace and precision. At 30,000 feet, the world may feel detached and distant, but for Maya, that altitude became clarity, perspective, a place above the noise where truth could be seen plainly, and the lesson she left behind is clear. Don't just build power, use it. Don't just chase success, define it. And never let anyone tell you where you don't belong, especially when you built the runway they're standing on, because sometimes the best way to rise is to fly right past them. Thanks for watching. If Maya's story moved you, inspired you, or made you think twice about how we treat people every day, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We bring you real-world lessons through powerful fictional stories, because sometimes a made-up story tells the truth better than the headline.